It's another absolutely stunning evening. It's about 5:15 and it is warm for the first time this year. I mean, actually hot warm. It's lovely. Axel has been out here all night, hasn't suffered any the worse. We've got a 120 grit sanding pad on here, which is really soft. Just want to knock back a couple of bits of rust like that. And on the pads here, there isn't really anything else to do. Then I'm in two minds about what to do treating it before putting the Jotun on. The Jotun is surface tolerant and it would go over that and it wouldn't cause it a problem at all, but I think I might put Hydrate 80 over the whole thing anyway, because that can act as a primer, and then it shouldn't take too long to go off with this heat, and then Jotun over the top. So that is what I shall do. That's had the lightest of tickles with the sander. Now I'm going to paint Hydrate 80 on it. It's borderline. It's probably a waste of Hydrate 80 to be honest, because it is just a big lump of rusty metal and it ain't going to get a lot better. It's just going to look prettier with epoxy over the top of the rust. But if I paint Hydrate 80 on it, it'll last a little bit longer before the paint flakes off. On with the Hydrate 80. Yes, I should probably be decanting it into a bottle rather than using it straight out of that bottle, but never mind. I'm concentrating on the trailing arm mounts and spring platforms. The middle pumpkin seems to be okay. It's come up really nicely actually underneath, so I won't waste too much Hydrate 80 on that part. Sun's going down. It's already looking good. That should be a much nicer surface for the epoxy to go on. I'm going to move that inside now because it's going to rain tonight, I believe. It's the next evening. I've mixed up some more Jotun. The axle is in there on stands. There's the paint. There's a few other bits and pieces of the Watts linkage bracketry, fuel tank mount, cross beam. So I'm going to start painting that. I'm just concentrating on one side of the axle, then when that's gone off overnight I can flip it up the other way and do the other side, and that way the axle stands won't mark it. And these bits really are just there so that I can use up the rest of my paint if I get that far. So more, I wouldn't say boring painting, but it's not exactly, you know, the most exciting thing to do. The end result will be quite satisfying, I guess, but you know, one of those phrases, it is what it is, has to be done, so I'll do it, much like everything else on this car. Morning. Well, it's morning for me, don't know what time it is for you. I've just turned the axle up the other way round after that coat of paint had dried and there's a few bits to touch in, but done most of it. I've got the new seal, so I can fit that. There were a few other bits and pieces I painted up, like the fuel tank strap and one of the Watts linkage brackets there. I did the other one, and I did the bit that bolts onto the front of the torque tube to go to the underside of the car. I've then been going through all of my boxes of bits and pieces and found lots of trailing arms and Watts linkages, but more importantly, I have found brand new Watts linkage that I forgot I had. I painted that up ages ago in epoxy, but I left it in the rain before the epoxy had gone off, so it went white. So that's just going to get rattle canned black. Pair of brand new old stock Unipot genuine British Leyland track control arms with this is going to be poly bushed, so I've not shown the foam bushes, but still got those. Pair of trailing arm forks to go to the underbody, brand new. Pair of trailing arms straight, which is important, brand new old stock new bushes. They're missing the nylon covers that go there, but I think I've got some solution to that. So anyway, this lot here is going to get painted with black enamel rattle can, and the bits for the car at the back that are by the axle are going to get done in the epoxy. I'm also going to put epoxy on the rear springs or rattle can, haven't decided yet, but I thought I'd just show before I clean them up. These are the original paint markings to identify with the spring type. So like most manufacturers, they put stripes of coloured paint along, so that's blue, single blue and single white. So I think that is the standard for all non-Vitesse, non-Van Passify cars with self-leveling suspension. Not sure, but there you go. All this stuff is pretty boring, pretty time consuming, and I'd much rather be doing something else, but needs to be done. So I have flicked the worst of the rust off of them. I've decided to do them in gloss black because the Jotun epoxy is great, but it always looks a bit gloopy, and painting the insides of springs and smoothing it all out would take forever, and it's probably not worth it. All these bits I've keyed up with sandpaper, and now I'm just degreasing it with panel wipe, and then I'll do the same with those. And then while that's evaporating off, I'll stir up the epoxy for the other bits. Then I'll come back, paint this while the other stuff's going off in the pot, ready to use, and then I'll paint the axle. Doing pretty well. Springs I've done in Hydrate 80 and then gloss black enamel, and then I've done the top side of the subframe and the underside of that cross beam in the Jotun. I also did the rest of the axle, so that is all done. Then Magical Mystery Tour continues because I can't be bothered to stop and start the video, so you will get travel sick. But we have track control arm, track rod, trailing arm, bit of the other suspension, bit there, bit over there, more stuff, what's linkage, and other bits. So looking good. Gonna have some lunch. It's towards the end of the day, and I've started amassing bits and pieces for putting it all back together again. I'm a bit short on nice shiny new bolts, so I might have to buy some, which is annoying, but I'll go through this properly tomorrow. But I just wanted to cheer myself up by fitting a new seal to there, which is the pinion seal that I excavated the other day. So that can just be lubricated with a bit of oil and then dropped over there carefully and then pushed in. It's another day. I did the seal and then I forgot to show you the results, so now I've turned the axle over. I can't be bothered to turn it back the right way to show you. But now, rear cover off, clean that up. We've got a new paper gasket under here somewhere for the rear cover, so that can go on, bolts torqued up. Then the exciting thing, we can start putting things back on the car. Just using a drill with a wire wheel to clean it up, but it is quite satisfying. Get a real nice shiny bare alley underneath. So I shall continue and then hopefully have a nice shiny thing to bolt on. Back again, sorry for the crappy editing. The cover is cleaned up and shiny. Just clean the inside and the gasket face. I'll give it a final degrease when we're ready to go. Now I've got to, of course, clean up the gasket face for the diff itself. So I've turned the axle back over this way, so any debris is going to drop out, or at least be easy to wash out. So I'm just using a razor blade to cut off paint over run. It's a gasket, you get the general idea. More, it's quite satisfying, I guess, but I don't know, things like this, they just take much longer than you anticipate and eat into your day. Got some black silicone Loctite 5980. I'm not sure with the paper gasket whether you need this or whether you just wipe oil on it and then clip it on, same as a motorbike side cover or something. But we are putting the finest of beads on here just to help it a bit. I say finest of beads, this is an old tube and the nozzle was all gummed up, so I'm just doing the inside, not doing around the outside of the bolt holes because they should be okay. And I'll smooth all this out with the razor blade in a minute anyway, so we don't get big gloops. You get the idea. We were almost ready to go. I went to offer up the gasket. I thought, hold on, that's a bit odd. There's no cutouts for the dowel pins. So the dowel should go through that bit and up here. We don't have holes, so now I have to go and cut those. Had I known, I would have done that before I put all the goop on, because it's now going to be quite tricky to guess exactly where the holes go. Fuck's sake. Easy fit over. We have gasket installed. Rear cover can go on. That's all been degreased and is lovely as well. Which way round does that go? That goes that way round. Perfect. But then in here I have the nuts and bolts, which have been cleaned in panel wipe, so they can go in. The only one that won't go in at the moment is the long one that takes the, well, it goes up here. This is the top side, and it carries the bracket for the handbrake cable. So I've just painted that because I forgot to do it, and then that can go back on. Then we can fit the torque tube, put some wheels on it, turn it around and slide it under the car. Much better. Glad I did that. The reassurance of having new oil seals, and I don't know, just as much of a ball ache as it is cleaning up stuff like that, it's kind of worth it. If anyone jacks the car up, it's going to look nice and shiny, and that's all that matters. Axle there, ready and waiting. Torque tube here, and I'm just doing the final cleanup of bits and pieces like this. This one, in fact, all SD1 torque tubes. I shouldn't really be pulling the drill trigger while trying to talk to you at the same time, but basically, although I've done the rear cover silver and this torque tube bare silver, the original cast alley, they would from factory have been all painted black, but I think I might have said previously, can't remember, but it just looks cooler if it's a bit shiny. Torque tube can be reunited, so that seal is new. I did have a new seal for here, but I think I need a special puller to separate it. And this shouldn't contain any oil anyway. It only gets oil in it if that seal has failed. So I'm not going to replace that seal. I've put a bit of copper slip on here because those splines, if they're not lubricated, they can wear. So that's what I've done. Bolts are here ready to go. So we can now just offer it up. Oh, I've reused that O-ring as well, because again, if that seal's good, then it doesn't need to be perfectly oil tight. There we go. These don't have plain washers, they just have spring washers, which is fine by me. Well, you get the idea. And there we have it, mostly assembled axle. And I'm going to leave it there for today, but next time I will be fitting the cross beam back in the car, fitting the little front hanger, the brake pipe, probably laying the handbrake cable in position, then shock absorber bushes. I'll have to paint up the old dampers wherever they are, and then put it all back together again. Bye. Welcome back to the bomb site. Last video I had just about put the rear axle painted over there. These were all the other bits I'd painted up. It's now time to start assembling things, but it may not all go particularly smoothly because there's a lot of nuts and bolts that I think are missing or I have them, but I don't have nice shiny new versions of them. Some I might reuse, some I will change, but things like the Tapetite trilobular bolts that go between these and the training arm forks and the body shell, they need really to be reused, because normal self-locking, well, you know, a plain bolt won't do. It needs to be a self-locking one. Stuff like this, that's all reusable, like that, and all of its bolts can go back on. What's linkage? I think I've got spare nuts but no bolts, so I'll do what I can, but it may not be a particularly satisfying video to watch. These bits and pieces are out because I was playing around. Originally these trailing arms would have had a nylon sleeve on here, and then the bushes go on over the top, but you can't get the nylon sleeves anymore. So what I did was buy nylon tubes, generic ones, 30mm long, off eBay. I actually need 50mm, which is an error on my part, but that will go on there. And then I'm replacing the original rubber bushes with decent poly bushes. They go that way round, so that will work like so, but I just need to trim these so that they're the right size. Then that lot will be posted through the rear axle like so, and then done up from the back side. That's that bit. We have the bracket for the brake pipe to go on. That's somewhere, I don't know what I've done with that. Maybe in this box here. Yes, there it is. So that needs a clean up. Doesn't need painting because I painted it last time, but you know. So that's really what I'm going to be doing. Some of this is quite satisfying because it's the reward for having done lots of cleaning and scrubbing. If I haven't painted over the walls. There is someone who keeps on posting up about the fact how it could be good if I could fix my GoPro and then have both hands free while I did this sort of thing. You're damn right. It's so annoying. Oh, but you get the idea. That's going on there with that and blah 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 blah. Found the bolts for there. Put that on. That's the hanger for the handbrake cable, which will go on the back over here. Again, if you're a total detail freak, all of these original nuts and bolts could be blasted and re-anodized and all the rest of it, but at the end of the day, it's a bolt on the underside of the car, so it doesn't really matter. So they're just getting put back on in Jamesery fashion. Badly, one-handed, much to the annoyance of my regular viewers. Apologies. Also in this box we have lovely new things which need to go on or in this axle, which I shall explain shortly. Those are some of them, and here are some more. Right. Packets opened, and I shall explain what we have. Number one, these are the rubber bushes which fit into the axle there and the body shell there for the dampers to go through. So they can be a bit of a fight to fit, but they will go. It's just a case of WD-40 and a pair of mole grips and some pokey screwdrivers. Then that little sleeve slides through, and that way the rod of the damper doesn't mash against your bodywork. It's the same reason you didn't have metal and metal on those training arms where I bought those nylon washers. So they can go in. Then we have rubber boots which go on the back plates where the handbrake arm is. So this slides over there and then engages over those little tabs. So you've got pair of those. And then last but not least, we have these little rubber blanking plates. They just fit in the back plate up there to stop water and grub contaminating your brake shoes. So I'll fit all of those now, then I'll spin the axle around and start messing with the trailing arms and the Watts linkage. Right, fitted the ones into the lower axle. Just if you're at home doing this, when you take the top ones out, normally the steel sleeve is okay because it's not in the road dirt and can be reused. The ones that go on the car at the bottom end are almost always rusted onto the bottom of the shock absorber to the point where you need to cut them off or use oxyacetylene or something to free them. So you may not need to buy 4. You might get away with just a couple. And aftermarket bushes never seem to be as good as the originals. They was perish and split, so that's an original one that's, you know, as old as the car. It's still all right, whereas I've had aftermarket shock absorbers that have come with those and they've perished within a couple of years. That bit all lubed up with copper slip. That's the Watts linkage, which goes, oh, and there's a washer there. I don't know why I'm describing this in great detail. If you're doing this, you probably know anyway, and if you don't and are not doing this, then you probably don't care, but additional information never hurt anyone. That goes like so, that goes there, and we're getting there. I also remembered I've got to fit the cross beam thing and find bushes and washers for that as well. Here we have the rear cross beam. Now, I was muttering in a previous video about the discrepancies between the number of washers between the top side of this and the underside of the floor of the car, and how earlier cars I'd had only had 1. This car had 2 washers and late cars have 3. I thought that was something to do with nose angle of the rear axle and perhaps performance off the line, I don't know, something like that. But talking to my friend Jason, who knows probably more about diesels than I do and probably more about SD1s in general than I do, he told me something rather interesting, and it makes sense. What would have happened is, it goes this way round, that goes up through there, bushing, and then the washers. He said that actually they spaced this out because in some cars the whole thing was rocking so far and could hit the heel board, so that might be why it was done. So I'm just going to replace like for like and just fit 2, but if you pull your car apart and find a different arrangement, that's probably why. Okay, cross beam is in. It's not done up because I'll probably do everything up at the end, same as this isn't done up either, because that needs to be free to rotate to help everything line up and centralize. But now I can slide the axle forward, lift the nose up, engage it in there, fit the insulating washers and the bolt, and then we're ready to play with dampers and things. That's up and in there, again all loosely fitted. Next we have the Watts linkage bracketry that goes on the back of the heel board. Sorry, not heel board, on these bits on the boot floor and over there. The original bolts would have been a mixture of these and I think some of these. These are the trilobular tapper type bolts again. The big ones I'm going to have to reuse because I don't have any others. And then these are trilobular as well with integral washers, so they'll probably replace those crappy ones there. One side done. Still got the original yellow paint marking on these from factory, so I've cleaned the rust off the edges, but I left that. This bit will be fed into that bracket when we get to the raising the axle point. Got to put that one on the other side now. You find me pausing for a moment. Got one of those frustrating chicken and egg type problems. This is a trailing arm assembly. So you have the 2 forks one either side, and they bolt to the chassis there and over there. They would be the next things to fit, or certainly the forks, because I want to fit the fuel tank, and the fuel tank kind of covers that area when it's in, so I want to mount the fork now. Problem being, the bolts I should be using are these, which are the, again, trilobular triangle profile locking bolts, but they're rather crappy and I don't particularly want to reuse them. I do have 4 of these nice new M10 bolts, but they're only 8.8s and they're not locking or thread cutting, whatever you want to call it. And if I fit those and then later buy the right bolts and come back to remove these, if the fuel tank's in, getting access past the fuel tank to those bolts on that side will be a right pain in the bum. So I'm kind of twiddling my thumbs, wondering what to do. Decision made. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to wait to get some correct bolts. Basically, this one, although it's not from that application, it's actually, what does that one for? I can't remember what it was for, but basically it is a trilobular locking bolt, same sort of type as that. Tap tight, I think they call them. And I've cleaned the head off, and it is a 10 point something or other. So basically, I think I need stronger bolts than the 8.8s that I have. So they're not going back in. I'm just going to have to wiggle the fuel tank up in there, and then when I get the right bolts, put the fork in afterwards and just hope I'm dexterous enough to get it up through there. Speaking of fuel tank, where is it? That's the strap, all cleaned up, and somewhere in here, my carefully stored parts, we have a new lock tab. So that's the tab that goes on the underside of that, behind the bolt head, and locks it to the underside of the car. So we'll get that in next. Don't know what I was worrying about. Loads of room in there to get to the bolts, and should be fine. I might leave it there for today. I'm tired. I've done quite a lot, considering it's, you know, the end of the day after work. It's about 7, and it's probably taken maybe an hour and 3/4 to do what you've just seen today. So again, lots of that time was wasted, spent looking for nuts and bolts, but still progress being made.